But London in the sort of, well, actually not early 20th century, up to 1966. It's not really living memory anymore, but it's kind
still,
of...
it's there.
It's there, isn't it? So in 1966, the floor of the old house closed and it was replaced by a skyscraper in the city, which I think has now been pulled down and replaced by, another building. The exchange has moved. And this place, I've only managed to see a few sort of rather blurry photos of it, but it was this giant dome. And because in these old exchanges, lines of sight are really, really important. So they build, in Chicago, they build a huge hall with trusses. So you have this huge empty space. But in London, they built a dome. And they lined it with this kind of blue-veined marble. It looked like Gorgonzola cheese. So the lads all called it the Gorgonzola Hall. And under this dome, there are 3,000 men, all men, because women weren't allowed on the floor of the exchange until 1973, which is definitely within living memory.
Yeah.
3,000 men, all suited, dark suits, dark ties, what have you, milling about. And they had this kind of ramshackle. So there were two kinds of occupation in London before Big Bang. We'll come to Big Bang because that's where everything changed. But there were brokers who dealt with the public, and then there were jobbers who traded in the exchange on their own account, and never the two. There was no overlap. Jobbers couldn't deal with the public and so forth, and this was supposed to protect everyone's interest, and it worked in some ways, not in others. And the jobbers were also members of the exchange. And they were little firms. I mean, some of them were only 3 or 4 partners. They were all partners that trading with their own money, and they'd have little pitches. They were called. They're like notice boards, really. Some of the posh firms might have a wooden chair or something like that. It's all very ramshackle. And on these pitches, they'd have stock prices written up, chalked up, the name of the stock, and then the assistant trader, the blue button as they were called, would write up the prices, and the trader would have a book, and then everyone would walk around. So if I'm a broker, if my client has asked me to buy a bunch of, I don't know, British Petroleum, was that even a traded stock then? Maybe not. Glaxo or something, one of the big blue chips that were traded in the 60s. I would walk around people who were advertising these deals, and I would try and get the best deal. And there's a lot of kind of squaring up and looking at each other and kind of eyeballing the junior to see if the junior is looking worried, and the jobbers thinking, I watched him walk around the pillar 3 times, he's nervous, and all this kind of thing. And then you go over and you have this kind of impossibly complicated verbal exchange, which I can't. There's a little quote in the book. I can't do. I
listened to it. I was like, what did he just say? It was all jargon.
It's old money as well. So they're doing this arithmetic in
crazy arithmetic in
halves and 1/16ths and what have you. But it's also in pence and shillings and what. So it's crazy arithmetic. And eventually, you have a deal, and it's a verbal deal. And the motto of the stock exchange is
my word is my bond. A bit like Scarface. I got my balls and my word, and I don't break either for anyone. So a bit like that. Yeah, my word is my bond. But Chicago, like you described it sounded a lot more crazy. Like people shouting and screaming at each other, and like you said, there were a lot of social, like societal things. Like if they want to sell, they do that, and if they want to buy, they do that.
Yeah.
And they'd some of the guys had platform shoes, so they would look taller, so they could all look bigger and more impressive. And
so in Chicago, they had pits, they had trading pits, and so instead of these pitches, they have sort of step pits, and these really evolved. People just started standing on chairs, and eventually they built them into the architecture of the place. And these things existed in some shape and form until maybe a couple of decades ago. So we all seen photos of them, and they're in their bright clothes and shouting and what have you, and they condense all the trade. So all architecturally, informationally, everything comes at Chicago's in the middle of like railway lines for the transit of goods, and telegraph lines for the transit of information from all over the country. All comes into this big room through phones and pneumatic tubes and all of these other kind of technologies, and then it's run by little messengers into the trading pit, given to someone in order to buy or sell. And there are people in there, trading for outsiders, trading on their own account, whatever, and they're jumping up and down, they're shouting, they're screaming, they're pushing, they're big guys, kind of ex football players and things like that. And the little guys, as you say, some of them have like lifts in their shoes, and they learn how to, there's a nice interview with one learning how to jump, learning how to scream and shout and catch people's
without
eyes.
hurting your voice and getting your voice to travel.
Exactly.
And he said it was so squished at one point. One guy was like suspended in the air because there were so many traders. That would be you, Damien. Little guy, just little guy, legs dangling in the air.
Yeah.
Every episode,
absolutely.
every
Sort
episode.
of, spit flying and all of these kind of things. But ultimately, it's the same thing. Is that you have your kind of hand signals on what have you. But the deal is a verbal deal, and people are bankrupted on the basis of those kind of deals. So. There's I don't know if you know the film Trading Places, this kind of classic 80s, slightly bad taste film these days, that at the end it has this kind of scene in a trading pit, which is kind of not a bad replica. It shows things being stamped in and passed out in the rooms and what have you. But at the end of it, the baddies are bankrupted. And the exchange operators come over and they say, you've got to settle your debts. You can't settle your debts. We're going to take your house. We're going to take your seats on the exchange. This is the partner's money. And that was the same in London, that you had this staff of waiters, they were called, but they were really like the traffic police and the managers and what have you. And they had gavels, and if a firm couldn't meet its obligations at the end of the day, they would literally hammer the firm, and it would be bust.
30% of men by the age of 30 see some sort of male pattern baldness. I had insanely thick hair all my life, and then in the last couple of years my hairline's just started running to the back of my head. Not one to go bald quietly. I started using Manual. Their service is great, really easy to use. Just go onto their website, fill out a quick questionnaire, and they'll send you a personalised treatment plan made up of clinically proven treatments such as minoxidil. No need for an appointment or to leave the house. It all just comes straight to your front door. I've been really happy with the results for myself. I've been using it for just over 12 months now. If you want to try it out, there's a link below, and if you use code MM55 at checkout, you'll get 55% off your first order.
You have this kind of apprenticeship system in London where youngsters coming in and then, they spend a few years learning who everyone is and learning the rules and all the rest of it. And eventually they get trading with the partner's money. And the partner takes an interest because this is their house on the line. And that that's the same. That was the same, I think, in the States, the same in New York, Chicago, what have you. This is a really important part of how these markets used to be organised.
I'm a really big fan of these conversations where we dive into finance history. I find it fascinating. If you do too, then you can watch the full interview with Philip Roscoe here.